huge renovations to that building, maybe. And interesting enough, in the study back in 93, there were a number of school districts that had buildings that were considered unsatisfactory buildings, either of quality that we told the school district probably better consider completely raising those buildings, walking away from those buildings, or changing the use of those buildings. So you now have a little bit of a guide for scoring. This one gives you a little bit further of the range, and again showing when we get into that 89, we got a few problems we need to work at. When we get to 74, we got some serious problems. This is for the sake of saying to our school superintendents when we're done, here's your roadmap for those buildings. Here's where you have been scored and rated. And out of your 7 buildings that you have, for instance, in your school district, this is where your buildings fail for scores. Now, going back up here real quickly, here's the rules for filling out the instrument. You're going to circle under each of the categories, and we're going to do one of the components at a time. Exterior first and go in interior. And we do this in sequence because it makes a difference. If we don't know what the exterior is outside, then we don't realize what has caused the walls to sag, for instance, or something else. So you're going to do 1-1 to 1-5, circling them, and then adding the score into this box. And then along with that, in that box, you're going to pick up your sheet and say, okay, I've scored that building 18. How does that equate to where it is? That equates an 18. Looking at your score sheet, grab that score sheet and see if they got a 18 in there, it would be fair. Exactly right. Now, that gives you enough of a piece of information that says to yourself, okay, we are now able to see in 1/4 of the sequences where we're going next. And so as we go through there, we'll do the same thing. Now, when we get down to the bottom here and do the entire building, we're going to do the same thing, adding up here, 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 and here. And then we're going to put over to the side here, like we've done on the rest of them, what is the overall rating, fair, poor, unsatisfactory, or excellent, which is considered good and excellent, to look at the building. And how much score do we have under each one? Now we go back and we look at it under the sequence and say to ourselves, overall, is these important to parts? And the answer is yes, definitely yes. We want to know what pieces of that building scored wrong to get us to 90. And so as we say here, here's 90, but we could have this. We could go good, fair, good. We sequence it like this to where then the person knows, I got some categories that aren't real good, but they're not real red flags. And so that makes a difference. So when we get through on the bottom of this sheet then, you're adding them all up. Now, we have a unadjusted and adjusted little sequence there. What that is this. You add them all up, and your unadjusted score is this piece. Your adjusted score says this. If there is any pieces of the instrument that when we evaluate that really isn't critical, such as cooling. I mentioned to you that in the state of Florida, cooling is required. Well, you asked your school superintendent when you go in, is air conditioning required? If he tells you no, then you gave them a 1. You add back in 5 points and put it back into the adjusted score, giving back some points because you don't want to have to upgrade air conditioning everywhere he doesn't, that isn't needed. That's the difference on unadjusted scores. The bottom of this sheet says this. Has the provisions for handicap accessibility been met? Yes or no? And as you get through the course, you're going to be able to look at things and say, is there ramping? Is the rails there? Is there electronic door openers? Any of those, and the textbook does a good job of spelling those out for you. Most of the time, unless it's a new building, the answer is going to be no, because they don't have electronic doors that open with the buttons. They don't have handicap toilets. They don't have provisions for handicap accessibility. Functional adaptability, meaning can the building function with what is there? And you're going to get an ingredient there of your textbook as well saying, can the building function okay within what is there, or do we need to look at this building and say to it, it really doesn't accommodate the programs we have. The function isn't there. Suitability of space is within the building itself. Are the science labs suitable? Are the home ec labs suitable? Are the classroom sizes suitable? Are the locations suitable? Is the library suitable? If that is not the case, then we can say we need some upgrade, but not a lot. Here's the bottom, your name, the date, the year built, and the amount of square footage in that building so that you have a nice score equated. Now, let me show you quickly as you're using your handouts. Your pieces of electronic sheets are going to be critical for you during this process. And as we are evaluating a building today, you're going to get that opportunity to use your sheets and follow along. This is the one that I just mentioned to you that will be your first crib sheet. You don't have to do any marking on this. I recommend you don't mark this up. Don't scratch on this thing unless you want to make one for each building. Use it as you do your textbook to say, okay, 1.1, here are the functions within that particular realm. And all the way through sequentially until you have reached Category 4 and through. This is the continuation of what's there. And you'll be able to see those as you go through. Those become a little bit complex at times, but again, don't feel that you have to master everything that comes along because that's not what we want. We want you to get the idea of how to do it. Now, the building that we're going to score today is scored for you here, and we will use this idea for you. We've walked through that building and said to ourselves, okay, here's the ingredients. As you can see highlighted, I did the same thing that you're going to do with a circle, or you can highlight them if you so desire too. And then I scored them, as I told you. I added down good and fairs, and I came up with 28. I looked at my 28 score here, and the only thing I didn't list on here for you is how 28 equates and how 18 equates, which you can do. A 28, if you look at your score under the 1.0, equates to good, and so does the 18. That equates to under interior. The 18 equates to a fair building. Now, down below, I've done the same thing. There are no poors or unsatisfactory, so you leave those blank. The unadjusted is 92, and there is no adjusted because in my particular district, I think air conditioning is important, for instance, and none of these do I want to waive and say that they are not required. So I'm not going to have any adjusted score there. There's the information, evaluator, date, year built, square footage. The reason square footage is important is we're going to see that in a minute. That is the one thing that we use to equate the cost for the building. Now, you're going to find another blank sheet, which is this one in your information. This is the one that you're going to use to do a calculation based upon the best guess estimate. I told you $700 million was what the cost was. Guess what? We had an Excel sheet that was hundreds of pages listing all the buildings in Idaho that gave us building by building score, component by component score. We listed them out in 4 components. Some people say, well, is it important to give just the building score? And the answer is, it is important to give the individual scores as well. So you do not skip over those and only do one of the 4. You're going to do each of the 4. Okay, you look back on the sheet that I just showed you under